No matter how hard we try to escape Doc Rivers, he keeps finding his way back into our lives. Whether it be watching him call the game of the Lakers versus Pelicans in the NBA in-season tournament, or his son running his mouth about his unfair treatment during his time with the Sixers, Doc Rivers continues to make his way into my brain. Now, I want to start this video off by the quote that kind of got me fired up, made me want to jump on a mic and talk about this a little bit. So I want to begin with this right here. This popped along my Twitter feed last night. Austin Rivers won't say anything positive about the Philadelphia 76ers. Quote, "They did my pops dirty." So for starters, a lot of these aggregation sites, such as Legion Hoops and stuff, sometimes they chop up the quote in a way that doesn't quite articulate what he means. So I wanted to get to the bottom of it, find this full quote before I made my judgment, and honestly, it only fired me up more. So when I clicked on the site, went to it, the full quote by Austin Rivers is, quote, "I'm not going to say anything positive about Philly, man," the younger Rivers said. "They did my pops dirty, bro. I got nothing to say about them. It is personal. Family over everything, bro. Family first, man. Come on, Daryl. I'm talking to you." Austin Rivers, man. So we'll start with the fact that, as this points out right below, that the elder Rivers now works as an analyst for ESPN, that being Doc, while the younger Rivers is still a free agent, as no team signed him during the offseason after he played with the 22-23 season with the Minnesota Timberwolves. For starters, not the best political move from a NBA standpoint of openly criticizing a team that could be in the market for a backup point guard, by the way, to say that you have nothing positive to speak about him. Now, it's a business. That this isn't something that I think is going to blackball him or prevent him from getting an opportunity, but just not the greatest move, maybe attacking the general manager of a team, specifically labeling him out, calling him Daryl to his name, that being Daryl Morey, of course. And it's a non-issue that this is a results-based industry. Doc Rivers failed during his time with the Sixers. That the expectation by Doc Rivers is that he would get the Sixers past the second round, that he was a championship-level coach, and the expectation was that he could raise this roster in a way that had not previously been the case. For 3 consecutive seasons, the Sixers failed to make it past the second round. That is justification for firing. It's as simple as that. And in fact, you can point to a number of specific situations within the Doc Rivers tenure that earned him the firing, whether it be blowing a 3-1 lead, whether it be losing to the Hawks. All these opportunities, all these specific things, the Ben Simmons beef, the James Harden beef, these were all issues that were tied to Doc Rivers. And by the way, how's Isaiah Joe doing? How's that guy that you would never allow to play? How's Charles Bassey doing? How's he doing? Just fine down in San Antonio. Plenty of young talent that we never got to see, that was just kept below, kept in the container, kept away from the team, all because Doc Rivers' unwillingness. This is the same guy that it took a full mutiny from the city of Philadelphia to play Paul Reed as the backup center rather than continually rolling out the corpse of DeAndre Jordan on the floor. It has been a frustrating run. There was plenty to nitpick about Doc Rivers. Now, it was not all bad. There were moments where he does deserve credit. I don't know if Joel Embiid takes the strides that he has into the MVP player that he is. Without Doc, the system was clearly catered to maximizing Joel and clearly worked efficiently in that regard. But he's still a damn good player that can get the job done without that. And we're seeing that with Nick Nurse, with a more team-friendly system, more movement, more cutting, stuff that is built to last in the playoffs. To sum up the Doc Rivers offense, and then I'm going to get right back to Austin Rivers in this specific situation here. To sum up the Doc Rivers offense, it boiled down to this, that it was Joel Embiid at the elbow, and the decision that he forced defenses to make was that you either leave Joel Embiid in one-on-one coverage, the elbow being the hardest place on the floor to double, so it makes it difficult there. So you either leave Joel in one-on-one coverage, or you double, and it sets up an open three-pointer. Now, Joel Embiid can beat any single player in the NBA in a one-on-one situation and has proven that at this point, and he led the NBA in scoring the past 2 seasons under Doc Rivers, so this obviously worked in his favor. And on the other side of things, the Sixers were the best three-point shooting team by percentage last year, so it makes sense to kind of make teams make that decision. Now, in theory, that simplistic idea makes sense, but over the long run, throughout a playoff series, when teams can make adjustments, get used to things, throw a team off their game, it just does not translate to postseason success. And that is what we saw with Doc Rivers, that when it got to the playoffs, this team hit a wall. And a lot of that was due to the schemes and due to the roster decisions and due to the unwillingness to make adjustments throughout a matchup. Those were all Doc Rivers' issues. Don't act like it was flawless. And by the way, Doc Rivers, he's still got 2 years on his contract. If you're going to pay me $8 million to stay away and not work, believe me, I will take that offer. So Doc Rivers was not dealt a bad hand with this situation. But I do want to get back to the family over everything quote. And to lay it out again, they did my pops dirty, bro. I got nothing to say about them. It is personal. Family over everything, bro. Family first, man. Come on, Daryl. I'm talking to you. Family over everything, bro. The same father that literally traded you. The same father that traded you for Marcin Gortat of the Washington Wizards. We're not talking about Austin Rivers needing to be the difference maker in some blockbuster trade. We're talking about Marcin Gortat, a guy who is just such an average center. I like Gortat. He's not a bad player. He had a good NBA career. But that is the guy that Austin Rivers was traded for. And Doc's been open about it. He's spoken about it. He said in this interview here, Doc Rivers opens up on trading his son Austin. Quote, "I was emotional." And I did think that this is a little funny here that I did want to read this quote. It says, during a new episode of Back on the Record with Bob Costas, Philadelphia 76ers head coach Doc Rivers opened up about coaching and trading his son Austin Rivers and son-in-law Seth Curry. "I'm the only coach that has ever coached my son in the NBA and my son-in-law," Rivers told Costas. "I'm also the only coach that have traded my son and my son-in-law. Now, trading the two is a little more difficult." Rivers admitted that he initially didn't want to coach Austin, but several members of the Los Angeles Clippers front office, including former general manager Dave Wall, pushed for it. "It was hard with Austin. Dave Wall and a couple other guys thought it would be a good idea. I did not like it. I just thought it's too hard," Rivers said. "This is what you want. If you want to coach your son in the NBA, he's got to be the best player by a long shot or the worst player by a long shot. Being in the middle makes it hard because the guy behind him thinks that he should play in front of him, and the guy in front of him who he's pushing thinks there's favoritism. So you really got to walk a fine line." Now, I do agree with the overall sentiment of Doc's point that it is not the easiest spot to have an objective opinion about your son and son-in-law, but the bottom line being that they did go through this and he did trade him. That the family over everything does not quite hold the same weight. And later on in that interview, he did speak that it was a cool moment. The conversation went fine, that Austin Rivers understands the business of things, what a team needs, all of these things. But there's also the same Austin Rivers that actively campaigned for Doc Rivers to get ejected from a game when playing against him. And this was hilarious at the time. It's even funnier now after these quotes, but I would be remiss if I did not bring this up.
Look at his son. No, that's the best. Look at his son saying, "Call him for a tee. Tee up, my dad. He's on the other team," and there it is. That might be SVP's best thing that he's seen all night. Doc's son begging for his dad to get a technical.
And now waving for him.
How good is that? Austin just looked at us. He's like, "Get him out of here. Get him out."
And he bought him dinner last night. That should hold some sway.
So Doc got ejected. Austin's like, "Call me, Dad. Call me."
And look, this is all fair game. I have zero issue with this whatsoever. But don't front like it's family over everything when we have these clear examples of you and your father going at it on the basketball court. Then talk about basketball. That's your job. That's what you, I guess, are being paid to do. I don't know what the Austin Rivers situation at ESPN is, but that's what you have a foot in the door. That's what your focus is right now. Maybe don't openly expose that you have a blind eye and favoritism to a team when your job is to objectively cover the NBA and basketball as a whole. Maybe think about that a little bit. Now, to talk about the Doc Rivers thing a little bit more, I did want to bring up, there's a couple quotes that snuck out, but this one specifically I thought hit the nail on the head, and this being by Daniel House, who spent last season with Doc Rivers and is currently spending this season with Nick Nurse. This quote came out during training camp. It says, House Jr., in his second season in Philadelphia, was asked to describe the differences between the two coaches. The veteran out of Texas A&M went on to discuss what he views are two different coaching styles. Quote, "It's just a lot more selfless basketball," House Jr. explained. "It's not so much of two guys having the ball. Doc is two guys ball dominant. Nick Nurse is everybody play together. Everybody works with each other. Help, cut, get your brother open shots. You can see the difference night and day." There also was a quote that came out from Jaden Springer, who talked about, this was especially funny. He said, I've never had a coach in the NBA that has broken things down or talked to me at such a regular rate. And it's like, well, you've been in the NBA for 3 seasons and only had one other coach. So I think I kind of know who you're talking about. Joel Embiid also had a quote saying that this is the way that he's always wanted to play, with a more team-friendly style, more movement. The bottom line is that's what we're seeing under Nick Nurse. That the Sixers got better by moving on from Doc Rivers and moving on to Nick Nurse. There's no hurt feelings about that. There's no personal critiques of that. It's just the business of things. It's just the reality of things. That Nick Nurse is a far better coach than Doc Rivers. That Doc Rivers won one championship a couple decades ago and has rode those coattails for the entirety of his career. He's the most blown playoff leads in NBA history. Most blown 3-1 leads in playoff history by a large margin. Losing his coach as far as losses go in NBA history. There's plenty that you can throw on the anti-Doc Rivers campaign that he does have an impressive resume. He will be a Hall of Famer. He's been around basketball forever. But to me, I find much more value in a guy like Nick Nurse, who's been through a million different situations, talking about coaching of the G League, coaching in England, coaching in Europe as a whole, versus Doc Rivers, who's just seeing the game the exact same way as he saw it in 1980, who's been in the NBA, been at this level, and has such a narrow-sighted view of the game, versus Nick Nurse, who wants to try new things, be adventurous, mix things up, try different lineups. That's what excites me about this team this year. The more movement is absolutely optimizing this team, and we do have the personnel to do it with the growth of Tyrese Maxey, all these other things. So Austin Rivers, I appreciate you sticking up for your father, but I do think they are hollow words. I do think that you should treat this as the business that it is. Worry about your profession in the way that you should. Keep personal views out of it and understand the situation as an objective analyst in the way that you should. That being that the Sixers got better by firing Doc Rivers and hiring Nick Nurse. Overall, you can keep moving on. We'll see if we see either of these Rivers back in the NBA again. We will unfortunately be listening to Doc Rivers' raspy voice on the broadcast. I do want him to be on the call for the Clippers-Sixers when that is the nationally televised game. We still got a couple months for that, but I do have that circled on my calendar, and I'm very much hoping that we can see Doc Rivers announce a James Harden versus the 76ers just to let his sneak disses get in there and any other comments that he wants to mumble. So I am praying for that, but other than that, please just keep me as little Rivers coverage as possible. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment. Is Austin Rivers out of line? Do you have an issue with what he said or anything else? Appreciate you guys for all tuning in. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and drop that comment below. And I will talk with you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.